PK in the universe, and I am back again with another video. I bet you have seen this question around a lot, or maybe you have this question, and that is, what is the point of Evercade, and is Evercade worth it? You know what? This question gets asked a lot. I get this question a lot from people I know and people I've, talked to online, of course. So I wanted to just answer the question. It's a simple question, but it has a very complex answer, and that's what we're going to get into with this video. So here we go. So what is the point of Evercade? I think the point goes all the way back to 2020. What happened in 2020? Obviously, we had a worldwide pandemic, and a lot had changed, and there was a lot of people who had video games, and some people, they needed cash, and some people had an influx of cash. So there were a lot of people cashing out on collecting video games, and were like, I'm done with this. I'm done with it. I'm going to sell my collection. And a lot of those people later on discovered Evercade. That's right. They were like, you know what? I was all done with video game collecting, and now I kind of just want to collect some video games. And a lot of people also had, this idea of wanting to go for a full set of something. Because that is one of the things you see so much on YouTube is people are like, I'm going for a full set of NES games. I'm going for a full set of Genesis games or Dreamcast, whatever. There's a lot of smaller collections. Evercade is one of the smallest collections and probably one of the more easier ones to obtain, especially in 2020. There was 10 total cartridges, so that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy to get. But those 10 cartridges did really well. So more cartridges kept coming out and people kept continuing to collect. So there's a lot of people who have this desire to go for a complete set because maybe they knew they were never going to get an NES complete set or a Super NES complete set. So they did that with Evercade. So I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people like to collect. There's also another reason is people are a huge fan of compilations. Video game compilations. They have a bunch of games all in one place rather than buying each game individually. So that is something that interests people. And I also think there's a lot of people who, maybe are no longer interested in collecting games that play on a CRT. They're looking for a more modern solution, and Evercade plays games through HDMI. But you know what? There's a lot of mini PCs, there's Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. So why get this thing? What makes it stand out? And the thing that makes it stand out, of course, is because it uses cartridges. Now, one of the things I get asked a lot too is, what are these cartridges? Are these like a ROM like the old NES or Sega Genesis? And I've talked about this in a number of videos, but hey, why wouldn't it be worth repeating again? This is flash memory. Now, does that make it exactly the same as an SD card? No. It uses a similar technology, yes. And guess what? So does your Nintendo Switch. So does your 3DS and DS. Those are all flash memory. The big difference between Evercade and the Nintendo systems is it uses volatile flash memory as opposed to non-volatile flash memory, which is what the Switch uses. Which means this is a cartridge that can be rewritten and you can actually save information on it, which makes it more vulnerable, which is a downside and an upside. It's nice that you can actually take your Evercade cartridge and you can put it in many of the other different Evercade systems, such as the original Evercade, Evercade VS, the Super Pockets from Hyper Megatech, which is a sister branch of Evercade, the Evercade Alpha, which is coming out soon, and then there's going to be some new Evercade VSs and EXPs, the Evercade EXP, and they're going to be called the Evercade VSR and EXP-R because they're a redo or a rebrand because Blaze basically no longer has the license to continue to use the games that are included in those two systems. So they're having a new rebrand and they've made it a different color. It's nothing really special, honestly. But other than it's missing some things, but it's missing games and has different games. So it is what it is. But yeah, that is the number of variety of systems as I just talked about, so there's a lot of different ways to play Evercade cartridges. The nice thing is when you have that Evercade cartridge, you can put it in any of those systems and it just works. Okay, and that's the thing. There's some downsides too. For example, cartridges failing. This does happen, but you know what? It happens with Nintendo Switch too. Nobody talks about it, it seems like. Literally today, I was playing the game Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, And I had this weird thing on my cartridge. It was this weird orange thing. I don't know what it was, this speck of something. But every time I kept putting my cartridge in the Nintendo Switch, it wouldn't work. I had to clean it off basically really good. And so, you know, this could happen, you know. And Evercade cartridges, yeah, they have their downside of being more vulnerable. But why do people still keep buying them? You know, if they're not perfect, well, I mean, nothing's perfect, you know. I have old NES cartridges that have died on me. There's no such thing as a perfect cartridge by any stretch of the imagination. Everybody likes to think that old games were designed to last 1,000 years, but they weren't. And I talked a lot about that in my recent video. I talked about physical is not forever in my most recent video that I made before this one. So definitely check that out if you haven't already checked it out. And I just, yeah, I mean, physical games don't last forever. And neither do these. Do these have a shorter shelf life? Well, it's really hard to say. It depends on everything that's going on. And it's one thing I think is another downside, of course, is that Blaze updates these cartridges. These are updatable cartridges, which can be good sometimes, and then sometimes it can have a negative effect if they screw up the update, you know, which I've seen happen in the past. But why? Why do people keep buying these things? It's crazy. Makes no sense, right? I think a lot of it comes down to collectability. It's easy, collectible, accessible. These cartridges can be bought on Amazon, or if you're in the UK at Funstock, in Canada, Video Games Plus. I mean, there's definitely places to buy these cartridges, and they're very collectible, and they come with a case and a manual and a cartridge. And sometimes there's stickers and stuff like that too. You know, there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of people who miss opening up a brand new video game that has a lot of old classics that we oftentimes remember, or new classics with independently developed games, you know, because they're still making NES games in 2024. But I can't stress this enough. There are advantages and disadvantages. But do I think it's still worth collecting? I personally think it's worth collecting if you're looking for the right games. If Blaze, who owns Evercade, releases the right games, the games that are genuinely interesting to you, and you want to buy an Evercade for specifically that game, yeah, I can see why. And I've been collecting Evercade games for a couple years now. And I basically, yeah, I had as many as 36 Evercade cartridges. I have about 19 at the time of this recording. I have downsized my Evercade collection significantly. And the reason I did that is at the end of the day, there's games that I was no longer interested in playing, and I wanted to get those in the hands of people who would be interested in playing those games. I like to collect video games, but I'm really careful about how I collect my video games. I don't buy games just for the sake of buying them. I like to think I have a pretty decently curated collection, a collection of games that I can play and enjoy. And that's what Evercade's all about, is collecting video games. At the end of the day, it's about collecting video games for an affordable price. Now, I will say this, that is not always the case anymore with Evercade's certain cartridges, because the unfortunate reality is that Blaze has licensing deals with particular companies such as Technos and such as Namco. They've had licensing deals with companies like this, and unfortunately those licenses run out and they have to stop making the games. So those games fetch pretty high prices, unfortunately, which really sucks for anybody who's just getting into this. The best time to get into Evercade collecting was 2020, and the second best time was 2022, and after that it's kind of murky, to be honest. So yeah, I think Evercade might still be worth it for some people, and some people it might not be worth it. But I do think there is a point to it, and that's collecting video games. At the end of the day, collecting and playing video games. It's really that simple. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and stay awesome in this universe. Thanks. Bye.